Welcome back to Reformed Thinking and our next deep dive. Today we're tackling two really packed verses, John 1.12 and 13. These verses are incredibly dense, defining just how someone becomes part of God's family. We'll look at the human response, the legal standing involved, and the divine power behind it all. Okay, let's unpack this. What we're really digging into is what it means when the Son is received. The sources we're drawing from emphasize that John isn't just talking about a warm feeling inside. It's a change in status, a solid standing before God. You could almost picture it like a royal grant, sealed by the king. It's that definite.
That framing is spot on, and we really can't just jump into verses 12 and 13 cold. We need the context, which is the prologue of John's Gospel, chapter 1, verses 1 to 18. Think of it as the interpretive key for the whole book. It sets up this big picture, light versus darkness, acceptance versus refusal. And John's structure, it's very intentional. The sources point out that the entire gospel, all the miracles, the signs, as John calls them, they're all pointing towards a specific goal laid out later in John 20.31.
Okay, but wait a minute. If the whole gospel is designed to get people to believe, does that sort of compromise it as history? Is it more like persuasion than just reporting facts?
Yeah.
How do the sources handle that tension?
That's a really common question. The sources argue John saw no conflict. He's recording historical events, the signs happened, but he's doing it with a clear theological purpose. That purpose statement in chapter 20 gives us two outcomes John wants for the reader. These really shape how he tells the story. First, it's about who Jesus is. The signs are there so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. John's using history to prove Jesus' identity and his authority.
Okay, identity first.
Right. And second, belief leads to life. That by believing you may have life in his name. So it's not enough to just nod along with the facts. Faith has to be directed towards the person of Christ, his saving role, his completed mission. Every miracle, turning water to wine, raising Lazarus, it's all testimony calling you to receive him and gain that status as a child of God.
All right, so let's walk through the prologue then, leading up to our main verses. It has this rhythm moving from, before time itself, right into human history, setting the stage. Verses 1 to 5 are just foundational, defining Christ's divinity. The sources pull out three key statements here. First, his preexistence. In the beginning was the Word. That's not just creation's start, is it? It's like before Genesis 1.1 even kicks off, he already was.
Exactly, before the beginning. Then the second point is his personal distinction. And the Word was with God. That little Greek word, pros, it suggests a real relationship, face-to-face. Intimacy, but also distinction within the Godhead itself.
So distinct from God yet.
Yet fully God. That's the third assertion. And the Word was God. No wiggle room there. He is divine. Equal with the Father, yet distinct.
And right away, John connects this divine Word to creation itself. All things were made through him. The sources really stress that nothing exists apart from his creative work.
And that creative power connects directly to spiritual life. Verse 4, in him was life, and that life is the light of men. Here's where the conflict starts, the big theme of the gospel.
Life in him is light for us. And then verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That phrase, has not overcome it. Ooh, Caddy Lamban. It's interesting. It can mean extinguish, but also understand, right?
It carries both senses, yeah. The darkness couldn't put the light out, couldn't snuff it, but it also couldn't comprehend it, couldn't grasp who he was. It suggests both active hostility that failed and a kind of willful blindness that didn't recognize the Creator walking among them.
That failure to grasp, that blindness, sets up the need for someone to point the way, doesn't it?
It does. Verses 6 to 9 introduce the witness. Since the world is dark, the light needs a messenger. God sends John the Baptist. He's described as a God-sent witness, testifying specifically so that people might believe through his testimony about the light.
So John the Baptist is crucial, but his role is really just to point away from himself.
Absolutely. His whole job is to keep the spotlight on the word. He's the pointer, not the point. Keeps us from confusing the messenger with the message,
Which leads us right into the sadness of verses 10 and 11, the rejection. The Creator shows up, and nothing. Or worse than nothing.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? Two layers of rejection. First, the world he made. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. The creation didn't recognize its own maker.
Just general ignorance of failure to see.
But then it gets more personal, more tragic in verse 11. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. This is talking about the covenant people, Israel. They had the promises, the scriptures, the history pointing to him, and yet when the Messiah arrived, they largely shut the door, refused him.
Wow. The Creator comes home, and his own family doesn't welcome him. That sets a pretty bleak scene.
It does. That rejection is the dark backdrop against which verse 12 shines. It's like verse 11 ends on this note of refusal, and then verse 12 cracks open a door. Because despite that rejection, the text says there is a group, all who did receive him. And that shifts our focus immediately to what that receiving actually looks like.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Verse 12 spells out the human part. To all who did receive him, who believed in his name. John doesn't leave us guessing what receive means. He clarifies it right there. Let's start with receive. The Greek is lambanō. The sources really dig into this word. It's not just passive acceptance like receiving a package. In John's usage, lambanō, or elabon in the past tense here, means actively welcoming a person with allegiance, taking hold of them in a sense.
That's a key distinction. It makes the response personal, relational. It's an embrace of Christ himself, accepting him for who he is proclaimed to be, the Word made flesh, the Son of God. It's the polar opposite of the refusal by his own people in the verse just before.
So it's not just taking a benefit like grabbing a ticket to heaven.
No, not at all. It's a personal welcome, a shift in loyalty towards the Son himself.
Okay, lambanō is this active welcome. But how specific does that welcome need to be? Is it just liking Jesus? Or is there more content to it?
There is, and that's where the next phrase comes in. John puts receiving and believing side by side in what's called apposition. Basically, the second phrase explains the first. Who believed in his name tells you what it means to receive him. Welcoming the Son is trusting his name. Trusting his name is welcoming him. They're inseparable.
Okay, so believing in his name defines the kind of receiving.
Precisely. And notice the specific Greek John uses for believing. Pisteuō.
Right.
Literally, to believe into. This isn't the common Greek for just agreeing something is true, like pisteuō. That little preposition is into, implies movement, reliance, casting yourself upon something or someone. It's personal trust, leaning your whole weight on Christ.
Moving towards him then, not just observing him.
Right. And it's belief directed into his name. In that culture, a name wasn't just a label. It represented the person's entire character, authority, mission. So to believe into his name means entrusting yourself completely to who Jesus is revealed to be, the Christ, the Son of God, and to what he accomplished, his identity, his authority, his saving work.
Back to that purpose statement again.
Right.
Believing he is the Christ, the Son of God.
Exactly. It's the difference between acknowledging, say, that a king exists and actually bending the knee, swearing loyalty to that king's name and rule. Saving faith is this personal attachment, this reliance on Christ and his finished work, not just agreeing with the biographical details.
So there's a real human action here, welcoming, trusting, relying. It's genuine. But the verse pivots immediately, doesn't it, to make sure we know where the power for this comes from.
Yeah, the shift is stark. Right after who believed in his name, it says, he gave the right to become children of God. The focus snaps from our action to his action. The he, here is the word Jesus. And that verb, egiken, he gave, it's significant. The sources highlight this isn't like paying a wage for belief. It's a gift, a grant bestowed from a position of authority, like a king granting citizenship.
Absolutely. It emphasizes that while faith is the necessary channel, the instrument we use to receive, it doesn't actually create the status.
Yeah.
Jesus, the giver, is the source of the status itself.
And the gift itself, it's this word exousia, translated right or authority. This seems central.
Oh, it's huge. Exousia is a powerful term. It means legal standing, rightful authority, entitlement, conferred by someone in charge. It's different from dynamis, which is more like inherent power or ability. Exousia is authorized power.
Like a police officer has authority, not just physical strength. That's a good analogy. And John uses exousia elsewhere for the authority the Father gave Jesus, authority to judge, authority over his own life. So when Jesus turns around and grants this same exousia to believers, he's giving them a status with real legal weight, real stability.
That image used in the source's adoption papers sealed by a king really captures that, doesn't it? It makes it objective, external, not just how I feel today.
Precisely. The legal nature of exousia is deeply pastoral. It means becoming a child of God isn't some fragile thing based on our performance or feelings. It can't just be taken back on a whim. Our standing is secure because it rests on Christ's authoritative grant, his royal decree. It's solid.
How does this idea of exousia, this legal right, protect us practically? What errors does it block?
Well, it sets up guardrails on two sides. First, it guards against presumption. Since it's a gift granted by the king, you can't just demand entry into God's family based on who you are, your background, or how good you try to be. It requires receiving the grant humbly.
So no barging in.
No barging in. But second, and maybe even more comforting for many, it guards against insecurity. Because the status is legally conferred by Christ, it's objective. It doesn't vanish if you have a bad day or if your faith feels weak. If Christ gave the right stands firm. You don't have to keep re-earning your place at the table.
And this status isn't just a title. It comes with real benefits, right? Family privileges.
Immediately. The moment you receive Christ and are granted this exousia, you get all the privileges of sonship. Things like direct access to the Father in prayer, protection, provision, even hardship gets reframed. The sources mention seeing correction not as punishment, but as fatherly training. And crucially, you get an inheritance tied to the Son himself. You're brought into the household with all its rights and benefits.
Okay, so verse 12 laid out the human response, receiving, believing, and the status granted exousia, the right. Now, verse 13 gives us the foundation underneath it all, the ultimate cause. This is where John explains the source of the new birth itself. So what does this all mean? The way verse 13 is structured is really telling. It doesn't just say who causes it. First, it very deliberately rules out other potential causes. It lists 3 human sources and says, nope, not that way.
That systematic exclusion is vital. John is shutting down common misunderstandings, both in his day and ours. The verse says, believers were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Let's take that first one, not of blood. Or actually, the Greek is plural, bloods, ex haimachon. That plural is significant.
Plural. Why bloods and not just blood? What's the difference?
Blood singular might just mean physical descent, but bloods, plural, likely refers to all kinds of lineage claims, ancestry, tribal connections, maybe even the specific bloodlines related to priestly duties or sacrifices. Think about first-century Judaism. Someone might claim standing based on being physically descended from Abraham, the blood of Abraham, or maybe based on belonging to a certain tribe or family line. The plural form covers all those bases.
So it's shutting down any claim based on heritage or family tree.
Exactly. It directly refutes pedigree religion, or what we might call cultural Christianity. Your family name, your ancestry, your physical connection to a covenant people, none of that generates this new birth. It's not about who your parents were.
Okay, not lineage. What's the second denial? Nor of the will of the flesh.
Flesh, here, sarx, typically refers to human nature in its fallen condition, including its desires and impulses. So John is ruling out that this new birth comes from any natural human inclination or effort. This isn't just about sinful desires, it includes our best natural efforts too. Moral striving, trying really hard to be good, following religious rules, acts of charity if they originate from the flesh, from our unregenerate human nature, they can't produce spiritual life.
So it tackles moralism head-on, the idea that we can earn our way or improve ourselves into God's family.
Precisely. No amount of self-discipline or good intentions springing from our natural selves can make a spiritually dead person alive. Life has to come from outside, from above. You can't will yourself from death to life using the resources of fallen nature.
That feels very countercultural today, with so much emphasis on self-help and willpower.
It absolutely is. John is saying spiritual death isn't just a bad habit you can fix with more effort. The will of the flesh is powerless to initiate this birth, whether it's the will to sin or the will to achieve righteousness on its own steam.
All right, so not bloodlines, not natural human effort. What's the third denial? Nor of the will of man. Why add this if will of the flesh was already mentioned?
Good question. The word for man here is anur, which often specifies a male individual or just a human being in terms of their personal volition. The sources suggest this phrase zeroes in on unaided human choice, the specific act of decision-making by an individual. It denies that the ultimate originating power for becoming a child of God lies within the autonomous human will.
So while verse 12 says we do receive and believe, which involves our will, verse 13 clarifies that our will isn't the source of the ability to do so.
That's the point. Verse 13 is about the origin of the birth. It blocks what's sometimes called decisionism, the idea that my act of deciding for Christ is the primary, self-generated cause that tips the scales from death to life. John affirms the reality of faith, the human response. But he denies that the unaided human will possesses the inherent ability to initiate regeneration. The power to come alive spiritually must be given first.
So after shutting down those 3 human-centered possibilities, heritage, self-effort, individual decision as the ultimate cause, the conclusion is unavoidable.
Completely. Only one option remains. The birth is, but of God. This anchors regeneration firmly in God's sovereign initiative. It's a monergistic work, meaning God is the sole effective agent bringing about spiritual life.
This helps clarify that tricky relationship between faith and regeneration, doesn't it? Which one comes first?
It does. The order implied here and supported elsewhere is that life precedes living, birth precedes breathing. God's act of regenerating, of giving spiritual life, is the necessary prerequisite for faith. Faith is the evidence of that new life, the first act of the newly alive soul reaching out to Christ.
So the analogy might be God gives the baby lungs and breath. That's regeneration, his work alone.
Right. And then the baby cries out. That's faith, the first expression of the life received. It's a real cry, a genuine response, but only possible because life was given first. The Spirit imparts life, and the first thing that life does is cling to Christ in faith. So these two verses, 12 and 13, they work together as more than just definitions. They act as crucial theological guardrails, keeping us on track and protecting against common errors about salvation. They keep the focus where it belongs, on Christ's gift and God's action. For example, think about sacramentalism. Verse 13, saying birth isn't from blood, pushes back against the idea that external rituals like baptism or circumcision automatically create spiritual life just by being performed, ex opere operato. Sacraments are vital, commanded signs and seals of faith, but they accompany or follow the Spirit's work. They don't cause the new birth itself.
Right, prevents confusing the sign with the reality signified, and it also stands firmly against moralism, correct?
Absolutely. Because sonship is an exousia, a right given by Christ. It can't be earned through good behavior or rule-keeping. Moralism tries to build a case for acceptance based on works. But John makes it clear. Good deeds are the fruit that grows from being a child of God, not the root that makes you one. The status is a gift received by faith, and then the grateful child seeks to live like their father.
And one more guardrail.
It also works against universalism. While the invitation is broad to all who did receive him, verse 12 clearly limits the status of children of God to those who actually do receive and believe in his name. It maintains the distinction. Everyone is a creature of God, yes, but sonship, with its intimate privileges, belongs only to those united to Christ by faith through the new birth.
Okay, so those are some theological boundaries it sets up. Now let's pivot to how this understanding of sonship, this exousia, impacts everyday Christian living, starting with assurance. It seems the foundation for assurance here is incredibly solid. It rests on Christ's authoritative grant, the exousia, and on God's sovereign act of begetting described in verse 13, not on, how strongly I feel my faith today.
That's the key takeaway from the sources. Your standing isn't based on the ups and downs of your heart or the vividness of some past decision. It's based on the objective reality of Christ's finished work and his royal decree giving you the right to be called a child of God. That king's seal analogy, again, the adoption is legally finalized, that provides immense security. You don't have to constantly wonder if the door might slam shut.
And that security logically leads to holiness, or what the sources call family likeness, right?
Okay. Yes, there's a direct link. If you've truly been born of God, verse 13, you share his spiritual DNA, so to speak. You've been given a new nature. And if you have the secure status of a child, exousia, you'll naturally start to resemble your father. Adoption isn't just a legal change, it's the fertile ground where holiness grows.
So it combats that potential misunderstanding of grace, sometimes called antinomianism, the idea that since we're saved by grace, how we live doesn't matter.
Exactly. The new birth guarantees a new direction. The exousia gives you the family name, and the new birth ensures you start living up to it. The desire for purity flows from knowing who your father is and the secure relationship you have with him.
And how does this perspective change how we view difficulties, the idea of discipline?
It transforms it. Instead of seeing hardship as random suffering or God being angry, the adopted child understands it within the context of a loving father's training. Hebrews talks about this. God disciplines his children for their good, to make them share his holiness. It's corrective, formative, aimed at producing righteousness, not punitive judgment.
That reframes suffering significantly.
It really does. Now, let's think about pastoral ministry. How does John 1.13 shape how we approach things like evangelism and church life? Knowing that new birth comes not of the will of man, but of God, injects both humility and confidence into evangelism.
Humility because we realize the results aren't ultimately up to our persuasive skills or clever programs.
Right. We can't manufacture conversion, but also confidence, because we know the gospel message isn't just words, it's connected to the life-giving power of the Holy Spirit. We preach, we invite, we plead, but we trust God to do the regenerating work.
This also seems crucial for curbing manipulation in ministry.
Absolutely vital. If you believe conversion is fundamentally a matter of human willpower or emotional response that you need to generate, the temptation is strong to use pressure tactics or psychological manipulation. But understanding regeneration as God's sovereign work frees the minister to simply proclaim the truth faithfully and prayerfully, trusting God for the outcome. We plant and water, God gives the growth.
And what about prayer? How does being an authorized child affect how we approach God?
It revolutionizes prayer. Because we have exousia, this granted right of access, we don't approach God timidly or uncertainly. We're encouraged, like in Hebrews, to come with confidence to the throne of grace. The spirit of adoption within us enables that cry of Abba, Father, the intimate address of a secure child to a loving parent.
And finally, church life.
It shapes our view of the church community. We're not just individuals who happen to believe the same things, we are members of the household of God. This brings a sense of shared identity, mutual care, accountability. Church discipline, when necessary, is seen as a family matter, aimed at restoration and maintaining that family likeness, all under the Father's loving authority. #outro.
So looking back at John 1:12 and 13, it really gives us a complete picture, doesn't it? You have the genuine human response receiving, believing into his name, lambanō, pisteuō. Then you have the solid legal status granted by Jesus, the right, the authority, exousia. And underpinning it all, the ultimate cause, the new birth that comes, but of God, his sovereign regenerating work.
That structure is so helpful. It clears away false grounds for hope, like relying on your family background or religious rituals or just trying harder. And it also removes the false fear that your standing with God is fragile or uncertain. All the reliance is directed to where it belongs. The Son who grants the right, and the Father whose sovereign grace brings us to life.
It really anchors everything in God's action and Christ's authority.
It does, and maybe a final thought for you to consider. We've seen that becoming a child of God involves receiving this exousia, this right secured by a royal decree, sealed by the king. It's not a casual invitation, it's a legal, binding status granting access and inheritance. So how should knowing that your place in God's family is a legal decree, not just a nice idea or a feeling, change how you face daily life? How might it affect the way you resist temptation or pursue righteousness, seeing those actions not as earning favor, but as living out the family resemblance of the Father who sovereignly chose to beget you?